Africa 54 takes an in-depth look at the root causes of hunger in South Sudan. Cash-strapped Zimbabwe struggles to pay its tobacco farmers. And the U.S. Embassy in Ethiopia teams up with local fashion designers to create custom-made looks for the disabled. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gidui. Ewart Vincent Makori is on assignment. This is Africa 54. Devastating food shortages afflicting several parts of Africa. Nigeria, South Sudan and Somalia are being especially hard hit, but food insecurity is also on the rise in other parts of the continent. The most immediate reasons for hunger are drought, crop failures and conflicts. But as VOA senior analyst Jeffrey Young reports, there are governmental, political and even ethnic factors that amplify the problem. In the second of a three-part VOA series, the underlying story of South Sudan's hunger is examined.
South Sudan's nearly 6-year-long existence has been torn apart by fierce domestic political infighting that has now grown into a civil war. Caught between the forces of President Salva Kiir and ousted First Vice President Riek Machar are the people. And now in the midst of that fight, an ever-growing number of them are in the grips of famine. This conflict's contribution to South Sudan's growing hunger is discussed via Skype by NGO Oxfam's Senior Policy Advisor Scott Paul.
Governance and domestic politics have a huge impact on people's food security. In the first place, they're responsible for creating or alternatively resolving the conflicts that create obstacles to people's access to food.
Famine was declared in parts of South Sudan in February by the United Nations, which said then that at least 100,000 people were facing starvation, with 1 million others close to it. The European Union says that nearly 5 million people, more than 40% of South Sudan's population, are what they term as severely food insecure. More recent reports say the country's northern Bahr-e-Ghazal region has nearly 300,000 people who could die without immediate and sustained food aid. This spreading hunger has been the direct result of the clash between Kiir and Machar, which began in December 2013. Some 300,000 people are estimated to have been killed, while more than 1.8 million of South Sudan's population have become internally displaced, with another 1.5 million now refugees. People driven off the land by this conflict are not growing crops. That's a critical factor amplifying food insecurity in South Sudan, according via Skype to research organization Chatham House researcher Ahmed Soliman.
I think certainly it has been from the effect that it's had on citizens in different parts of the country. The fact that farmers, people have been prevented from planting, harvesting their crops, and you've had cycles of displacement for over 3 years in the country.
It's bad enough that South Sudan is hungry as a consequence of conflict which empties farm fields and hampers vital relief efforts. But the situation has been made even worse by the use of food access as a reward or punishment. That's detailed by Center for Strategic and International Studies Africa Director Jennifer Cook.
It appears at this moment that the South Sudanese government is using food deprivation as a weapon to depopulate and demoralize the areas where its opponents are most prevalent.
But while food is being used as a weapon to coerce President Kiir's opponents, this practice is also gaining growing condemnation among the international community. Again, via Skype, Oxfam's Scott Paul.
The weaponization of food always comes back. It always ends up being widely publicized, and everybody loses. But it's still a really unfortunate tactic of war.
Chatham House's Ahmed Soliman says that the fight between President Kiir and Riek Machar to control South Sudan and its oil riches leaves little room for reconciliation. And while civil war rages, relief NGOs struggle to reach and address the ever-growing areas of starvation caught between this clash of strongmen in death's lengthening shadow. Jeffrey Young, VOA News.
Made an unannounced visit to Afghanistan Monday. His top comes as Afghanistan's defense team underwent a major shakeup in the wake of Friday's deadliest ever attack on a major Afghan army base that killed at least 140 soldiers and wounded many more. VOA's Kala Bab is traveling with the secretary in Kabul and filed this report.
Was a big shakeup just hours before Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis arrived here in Kabul. The Minister of Defense and the Army Chief resigned. That is due to an attack a few days ago where 140 people were killed at a regional headquarters for the Army in Mazar al-Sharif. About 10 Taliban militants entered. They were disguised as Afghan Army members, and they got in because they were saying that they had a wounded soldier that needed immediate attention. They made it through 2 checkpoints before they were stopped, but then they went on a rampage and several people were killed. This was, in fact, the deadliest attack on a base here in Afghanistan in 16 years. Sources are telling me here that President Ghani has appointed an interim minister of defense. His name is General Tariq Shah Bahrami. It is not clear at this time if he met with Mattis today, but Mattis did meet with President Ashraf Ghani, and he also met with his commander on the ground, General John Nicholson, to talk about the ways forward for security in Afghanistan. One important thing to note, officials tell me that nothing big is going to be announced out of this trip today because the Pentagon is still working with the White House and Congress to finalize Afghanistan policy and the financial commitments before moving forward on any final plans. Reporting here in Kabul at Resolute Support Headquarters, I'm Carla Babb, VOA News.
Suicide bombers launched 2 attacks in northeast Nigeria on Monday. In the first attack, AFP quotes security officials as saying 2 bombers blew themselves up and a third was shot dead in the village of Mamanti, 15 kilometers east of Maiduguri. 1 vigilante was reported killed and another injured, and a second attack was reported 3 hours later in Mainari, 10 kilometers west of Maiduguri. A man blew himself up as vigilantes approached, killing 3 of them and wounding 2 others. Although there has been no claim of responsibility, Boko Haram militants often use young people, especially teenage girls, to carry out attacks against civilians. The commander of the U.S. Africa Command says it is too early to label a recent spike in piracy off the waters of Somalia as a trend.
This month has been 4 or 5, maybe 6 piracy attacks here in the region. Some of the reasons we see for that have to do with the drought and the famine, because some of the vessels that have been taken under hijacking have had some food and some oil on them. Moreover, these particular ships have been very small in stature and really a lucrative target for pirates.
Marine General Thomas Waldhauser made the comment Sunday in Djibouti during a joint conference with visiting Defense Secretary Jim Mattis. The rush of pirate attacks comes after a 5-year downturn in the assaults that had grown to crisis proportions from 2010 to 2012. More than 20 million people from Somalia, South Sudan, Nigeria and Yemen are in danger of dying from starvation within the next 6 months, according to the UN World Food Programme. In East Africa, gunmen in Kenya wounded an Italian-born conservationist, Goldman, at her conservation park Sunday, the latest in a string of attacks during land invasions in drought-stricken northern Kenya. The 73-year-old author of the memoir I Dreamed of Africa was shot in the stomach after the vehicle she was driving was ambushed. Rangers from the Kenya Wildlife Service intervened and fought off the attackers. Goldman was first flown to a hospital in nearby town of Nanyuki to be stabilized and was later transferred for surgery at a hospital in Nairobi. Goldman's family owns the 100,000-acre Laikipia Nature Conservancy. A wave of violence has hit Kenya's drought-stricken Laikipia region in recent months as armed cattle herders searching for scarce grazing land have driven tens of thousands of cattle onto private farms and ranches from poor quality communal land. Now to Southern Africa, where Zimbabwe's cash crunch continues to bite as tobacco farmers demand their money after weeks of delayed payments. Last week, small-scale tobacco farmers camped at various tobacco auction houses in the capital, Harare, demanding checks for delayed payments. During last month's annual tobacco auctions in Harare, Agriculture Minister Joseph Made told farmers they would be allowed to withdraw up to $1,000 a day to allow them to buy farm inputs for the coming season, a promise that has not materialized. Rejoice Harona is a tobacco farmer.
I've been coming here for 3 weeks and even spent Easter holiday here, and there is still no money. I sold my tobacco and was given a voucher, which means my payment should have been processed by now. I don't understand why I still have to wait for another 72 hours to get my money.
Tobacco is Zimbabwe's single largest export commodity ahead of platinum and gold. Official statistics indicate that over $50 million have so far been traded in tobacco sales, but farmers are worried that they may not have enough time to prepare for the next season if they don't get their money in good time. Another tobacco farmer, Abel Dina, says the agriculture minister should intervene.
We are not expecting our money in bond notes only, but half in bond notes and the other half in US dollars. We are also expecting all our payments in full as per the tradition, and we ask the minister responsible to intervene. We also understand that the buyers have poured in money, and we wonder why we cannot get paid. Where is it?
In recent months, cash shortages have forced Zimbabwe's banks to impose daily maximum withdrawals for most Zimbabweans of as little as $50 per day. Moses Bias, the Boca auction floor operations manager, says farmers are not receiving their payment on time because most don't understand new government regulations on processing their funds.
If you look back before, farmers didn't have the bank accounts. All they were doing is they were coming in, sell their tobacco, and we would give them a check voucher, which they would then go to the bank and present to the bank, and then they'll get all the cash out. And now it's a different story now.
Nelson Banya is a Harare-based economic analyst.
In terms of the tobacco production cycle, it's very tight between the onset of the marketing season and the start of the preparations for the next season, and most of these preparations actually rely on cash payments, and as a result there is a heavy demand for cash. Yes, tobacco farmers will bring in quite a bit of liquidity, but that liquidity is also required in terms of them prepping up for the next season. So it's a bit of a vicious cycle.
A bond note currency was introduced in Zimbabwe last year to ease the cash shortages, but the country abandoned its own hyperinflation hit currency in 2009 in favor of the US dollar. Economists say the current foreign currency shortage is fueled by a decline in remittances by Zimbabweans abroad, lack of foreign investment, and a widening trade deficit. Now to France, where results of the first round of presidential elections confirm that centrist Emmanuel Macron and nationalist anti-immigration crusader Marine Le Pen are heading into a runoff in 2 weeks, marking what analysts describe as a political earthquake in France. Monday's final results show Macron with nearly 24% and Le Pen with 21.5% of the vote, qualifying both of them for a presidential runoff on May 7th. VOA Europe correspondent Luis Ramirez reports.
It is now a real possibility. Marine Le Pen goes to the final round with a chance to become France's next president.
It's time to free the French people from the arrogant elite who want to control what they do because, yes, I'm the candidate of the people.
Her runoff opponent, after receiving the most votes, is former economy minister, 39-year-old Emmanuel Macron, who ditched his ties to unpopular socialist president François Hollande. Macron said that in 1 year, he and his supporters have entirely changed French politics. It is being called a political earthquake in France, the first time in the modern republic that the leading presidential contenders are not from mainstream parties. News that Le Pen could become president sent angry left-wing demonstrators to Paris streets, where they clashed with police. Analysts say the reason some urban voters cast ballots for Le Pen is anger with the establishment.
Some of them for the thrill of it, pure and simple, like playing Russian roulette, but politically. Some others, it would be because they despise the elites of this country.
Le Pen wants to stop most immigration, especially by Muslims. She wants France out of the EU and more jobs for the French. Macron is pro-business, pro-EU. His support is among the urban middle and upper classes that have benefited from globalism. Either way, the French on Sunday voted for change. On May 7th, it will be a new day for France. Luis Ramirez, VOA News, London.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook. So check us out and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, billionaire philanthropist Bill Gates sounds a warning on cuts to aid budgets. Stay with us.
This is Living Better.
In his native Somalia, Abdikadir Adam watched neighbors injured by bomb blasts bleed to death en route to the hospital. So, with his life savings, he bought and built his own ambulance.
First ambulance I paid, I remember the only money I was having, 4,200 I paid. And well, my family was telling me to stop this job.
10 years later, with help from donors, that single van has grown into a fleet called Amin Ambulances, Somalia's only free ambulance service. Beyond the violence, Somalia also faces severe drought, and the lack of basic services puts many at risk.
We are not dealing only the explosions, but also we deal with pregnant women. We took the children who's in diarrhea.
Adam says his dream is to reach all of Somalia with emergency transportation, adding helicopter support to his fleet to get people to help even faster. I'm Martin Seacrest for VOA's Living Better.
I'm Jeff Selden, and I work the National Security Beat. National Security Beat is anything that affects the national security of the United States, from counterterrorism to surveillance to even relations with Russia. It's one of the most fascinating beats you can have. It's probably one of the more important beats that you can cover because it touches on so many areas of the world, so many areas of people's day-to-day lives. I'm Jeff Selden, and my beat is national security.
The founder of Microsoft, billionaire philanthropist Bill Gates has given a passionate defense of foreign aid and voiced fears that the political climate in the US and in Britain could see aid budgets cut. During a recent speech in London, he warned that withdrawing aid would, in his own words, create a leadership vacuum that others will fill. Henry Ridgewell reports.
Bill Gates gives $5 billion a year to development aid, making him one of the world's most generous philanthropists. In a speech at London's Royal United Services Institute, he voiced fears that the political tide is turning against foreign aid.
It concerns me that some world leaders are interpreting recent events as reasons to turn inward instead of seeing them what they are. Problems that, although they're difficult and will take time, can be solved if we invest in the long-term solutions that are necessary.
The United States remains by far the world's biggest donor, funding long-term programs and emergency relief across the globe, such as this $1.8 million aid package sent to Peru following floods earlier this year. But US President Donald Trump is proposing to cut the $43 billion foreign aid budget as part of efforts to reduce government debt. Gates argues many critics of foreign aid don't realize the huge progress that has been achieved.
If you could only pick one number to highlight the effectiveness of the development agenda since 1990, I would pick the number 122 million. That's the number of children's lives that have been saved.
He disputed the notion that funding foreign aid is a bottomless pit.
As you bring down that child-to-death rate, families choose to have less children. Population goes down very substantially, which brings within reach all of the things society is trying to do: better health, better education, economic opportunity.
Bill Gates' speech in London comes as Britain gears up for a snap election in June. The UK is one of the few developed countries to meet the UN aid budget target of 0.7% of GDP. Current Prime Minister Theresa May has committed to keeping that pledge, but many in her party want aid money diverted to the military. Gates said he wanted to make the case for the facts.
When aid is mismanaged, it is a double crime, stealing both from the taxpayer and the poor. But let's be clear, the bulk of this aid is getting to its recipients and having an incredible effect. There'll always be a need to adjust. We're working in very tough countries, and so you'll never get 100% perfect effectiveness. But you can learn, and every year, the aid is better spent.
Aid agencies say the debate couldn't come at a worse time, with around 65 million refugees around the world, worsening conflicts in the Middle East and famine striking East Africa. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Marches took place in hundreds of cities around the world Saturday in support of science. Organizers hoped to bring government attention to fact-based decisions on health, the environment, safety and the economy. VOA's Caroline Presutti brings us the sights and sounds from these rallies. Her first stop, the U.S. Capitol.
This was probably the most intelligent march ever. Most everyone was a scientist, a nerd, and proud of it.
This is about the pace of science, but it all leads somewhere.
Jim and Sam left their jobs at Michigan State University and flew to Washington with one message: science matters.
And if we don't realize the importance of this and continue this investment, everything that made us great again, it's going to go away.
From Germany to Taiwan to Australia, this global event electrified science enthusiasts. They rallied for government budgeting based on facts.
I came along because I believe in evidence-based research.
Here in the U.S., Griffin Adams is a future scientist.
Well, if they don't look at facts, then science won't be science anymore and people will be confused.
I'm also a 6-year veteran of EPA.
The U.S. budget chief has said environmental agencies, medical research, and other departments will face cuts.
Regarding the question as to climate change, I think the president was fairly straightforward. We're not spending money on that anymore.
In a tweet during the Science March, President Donald Trump said, "We stand committed to preserving the natural beauty of our nation."
Nerds can do anything if we work together.
Some critics say this type of activism politicizes science in a field where most don't communicate their achievements. Jim Deering says matter doesn't stand still.
They've done their work and they haven't had to become very political in terms of funding allocations. But I really do feel like that time has passed.
I don't think this is a political thing. I think it's just more of a statement of we need science out there.
So what happens next when the marchers leave and the leaders return to their jobs? Organizers want people to carry this excitement back to their hometowns. And as for Washington, there's another science march next weekend for climate change. Caroline Presutti, VOA News, Washington.
It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Look good, feel better. Ethiopia's disability fashion trend. We'll be right back.
Hamilton Live is a live audience performance. With live music, you have that interaction. There's nothing like getting that immediate feedback from the folks that you're performing to. They feel it and they respond back to you. You see it in their eyes. You know that you're connecting with them. Like if any form of communication, it's that response that you get back.
How do you see the world?
I see countries in turmoil.
I see our planet changing.
I see people at peace.
No matter how you see the world, you'll get an unbiased and uncensored view of it on Voice of America. On television, radio, online, and mobile. In more than 40 languages all day, every day. Millions of people tune us in.
How do I see the world? On Voice of America.
Wherever you are, Voice of America is on air, reaching more than 130 million weekly, worldwide, in more than 40 languages. Online, social media, and breaking news from around the world. On the go, dozens of new features on popular platforms with new apps and trending topics. Voice of America, on air, online, on the go.
And welcome back. Here's what's trending. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, roughly 20% of the black population has a bachelor's degree. For Devion Reeder, graduating from Eastern Michigan University was a lifelong dream. A dream he says was almost shattered by his stepdad, who told him there was no point going to orientation. Last week, Reeder posted a tweet celebrating how far he had come. Shortly after, the tweet started trending on social media. So far, the tweet has been shared over 100,000 times with over 600,000 likes. Way to go, Devion. And welcome back. Again, here's a story we told you about from Ethiopia. 27-year-old Sabella Kadir was born with disabilities, but she has worked her way to the top of a society where some traditionally believe that disability is a curse sent by God to punish past sins of the family. Kadir is an actor, director, scriptwriter, and a model. Now, fashion designer Tigist Demes is creating fashionable clothes that are helping boost Kadir's self-esteem. She showed off the threads at Ethiopia's first ever fashion show, made up entirely of models with disabilities and showing custom-made clothes for people with disabilities, a project set up by the Ethiopia Fashion Designers Association and funded by the U.S. Embassy in Ethiopia. And finally, welcome to the future of robotics. Here are a few examples of the many different robots you can now rent in Japan. Oryx Rentec Corporation started its robot rental service in 2016 with just one robot. The business quickly expanded, and now it offers a wide range of robots. Typically, customers can rent their robots for periods of 6 months at a time, when the option of then buying or renewing the rental up to 3 times. Currently, the company only lends to other companies, but due to the high number of requests from individuals, it is considering expanding its service further in the future. And that's what's trending today. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching, and a very good night from Washington.
Welcome to English in a Minute. A cucumber is a long green fruit that is usually eaten raw. Why are Anna and Jonathan talking about the temperature of produce?
Cool as a cucumber.
Did you watch the basketball game last night?
I did. I could not believe that player made a basket at the very last minute and won